to just give a brief description. I'll read it from here. John Jung is a retired psychology professor from California State University, Long Beach, and in retirement, he reflected on the lives of the immigrant parents, his immigrant parents, and their children, the only Chinese in Macon, Georgia. When they operated a laundry from the 1920s to 1950s, before the Civil Rights era, thinking about what it meant to be Chinese when everyone else was white, is that right? Or black or white. My eyes are just not focusing today. I'm so sorry. It's that age thing, yeah. Led to a memoir. He wrote Southern Fried Rice, Life in a Chinese Laundry in the Deep South. And then he's written so many other books too. So John, now that you've seen the performance, could you see some of those, the reflections of some of these images that you saw on stage in some of your writing?
Oh, absolutely, definitely. This was like a history lesson in 1 hour of covering at least 150 years, I guess. A lot of people don't know that there were Chinese in the Deep South right after the Civil War. In fact, there were some Chinese who fought in the Civil War, some on the South and some on the North, actually. But I think the performance was outstanding, and in the way it was organized and presented to show this story that's pretty much unknown. Throughout my life, people would say to me they didn't know there were any Chinese in the South. And so I think part of what I've been writing about and what you have portrayed so vividly is the way Chinese settled not only in Mississippi but other parts of the South, and how they earned a living through their family businesses. So I congratulate you on your achievement.
When we were growing up, they didn't teach us how to speak Chinese, and just like the play said, they spoke Chinese to us, but we didn't have to answer. And I really related to that. And I also, looking at the pictures, it was so kind of sad looking, so dreary. But then again, the play starts out that, and then at the end, it shows how far we've come. We still have lots to go, but we've come a long way.
African dance king. So we're living together in the same house, two company, living together. We learn each other dance form. Then we go to community, how to reach and to teach different kind of cross-cultural form. This is beside this, I have one story. Check us and I, after discussion, let us find a same thing. Doing a piece, we can go out doing lecture then together.
Explains the trials and tribulations of a Chinese immigrant kid with Chinese parents that are opening a restaurant. Are you guys familiar with that show?
You know what? That show is almost like how I grew up.
Yeah.
Because my parents had we had a store first, but we had a restaurant. And it was in an old steakhouse.
Right.
Exactly like Fresh Off the Boat.
Exactly.
Coincidental.
Yeah.
We had the trickling waterfall feature coming out, and we had a little bar on the side that occasionally there would be bands playing in there, some country songs, And it eventually changed to karaoke eventually. My kid says that's Grandma. Because we had a restaurant. They said she reminded her of the grandma, the life.
Pick up a little bit on the question about Fresh Off the Boat, which really illustrates not only generation gap, which is, of course, as someone else said, universal for all cultures. There's always going to be some disconnect between parents and their children and some conflict. We also have this cultural conflict of, immigrant with their language and their culture, and then their children trying to fit in with mainstream America, but also having one foot connected with their immigrant parents. So there's that issue involved. But I want to digress from that a little bit because family is an important part of this production, and family is a very important part of Chinese culture. And what we see in these families, in the laundries, in the restaurants, and in the grocery stores, is how much the children had to work in those places. They had work in their family businesses, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. We all learn how to deal with people as children. We learned how to deal with some pretty ornery adults. And so we didn't always like having to do that work, but a good thing was we learned a lot of skills from that. And our parents always knew where we were. It kept us out of trouble. We weren't out on the streets running around late at night because we were committed to working to help the family survive. Now that was especially true for the Mississippi grocers and other Chinese who had grocery stores. However, other Chinese weren't so fortunate as to have families because the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882 prevented most Chinese from having families. This is what we talk about, the bachelor society for Chinese Americans. So, for example, laundrymen technically were not considered merchants. They were considered laborers, and they were not allowed to bring their wives and children over. And there's a long story about how I got here, because my father was a laundryman, so I'm an exception to that rule, which, but for many of them, they could not bring their families over. So that's like a footnote onto the theme that you presented in the show, which is very important, to show that family was really important, but also there was also family conflict, which had to be resolved.
Whether they're police officers or actors or comedians, Margaret Cho, for example, and she had a tough time initially, but then as people became accustomed to her, say, hey, she's a successful comedian and can make it out there in American comedic circles. So that's part of my work. I feel that as American Chinese, that being active in all facets of American society is important because that changes mindsets, changes stereotypes. When people get beyond the physical features that may be different from Western features.